Hi, third graders. Welcome to your reading lesson for today. We are going to be looking at a new skill. I know that seems a little bit crazy because we're almost at the end of the year, but there's one last really important comprehension skill that you need to learn in third grade and you need to practice in third grade. And so for the next 2 weeks, we will be thinking about identifying important ideas in the books that we read. So I want to review for you some of the skills that we have practiced this year. When we started out the year, we really worked on envisioning. And envisioning is when you make a picture in your mind of what's happening in the book. And so we practiced a lot, like stopping when we were reading and picturing what was going on, making a picture in our minds of what was happening in the book. And the reason we did that is because when you can picture what's happening, it really helps you understand and enjoy what's going on in what you're reading. Then we talked about and practiced making inferences, which is when you have ideas about characters or about things that are happening, and they're not things that the author just comes out and tells you. They're things that you think of just by gathering clues from the text. So that's what we did for making inferences. And again, this is a comprehension skill that just helps you really understand and think deeply and get more sucked into what you're reading. Then we practiced for what felt like a really long time, wondering and asking questions as we read, especially in nonfiction books. The ability to stop and think about what you read and then ask a question about what you read. It helps you understand what you're reading and it helps you remember what you're reading. And for me, it helps me enjoy what I'm reading too. Then we talked about using text features to help us understand what we read and what we learn. And now we're working on identifying important ideas. So we are going to read from a book called Lifetimes. A lifetime is how long an animal or a plant is expected to live. So the book that I'm going to be reading to you from Lifetimes is filled with just one page pieces about different animals and plants and the lifetimes of these animals and plants. So we're going to use this book to practice identifying important ideas. The page that we're going to be reading about is about army ants. So I just want to stop and ask you for a moment before we read it. What do you think you know about ants? Go ahead and think in your head. Say it out loud if you can. It doesn't make you feel too weird. What do you think you know about ants? Okay, so I was thinking about this also, and I was thinking about how I know that ants live in colonies, like they live with lots and lots of other ants. We have some ants in our house right now that seem to come out whenever sugar is left out on the counter. So I'm wondering if ants like sugar. I think maybe ants like sugar. I know that ants usually try to gather food and then bring it back to their colony to share with the other members of their ant family. I wish I could hear what you thought you knew about ants too, so that we could add on to our ideas. Okay, so I've thought about ants a little bit. My brain is ready to learn more and maybe to ask some questions. So I'm going to switch back over to the Lifetimes book. And I'm going to read this page about army ants twice. And the first time I read it, I'd like you to just think about what it is that you're learning about ants on this page. Okay. A lifetime for an army ant is about 3 years. Army ants are famous for their ability to work together to accomplish amazing things. They march along like soldiers, sometimes a million at a time. Nothing can stop them. When they come to a river, they make an ant bridge of themselves to get across. If the river is very wide, they form large ant balls and float to the other side. Army ants eat mostly insects, spiders, and small animals. although they have been known to eat horses, cows, and even tigers that are tied up or caged. People who live in areas with army ants have to leave their homes for a day or two when the ants come marching through. When they return, their houses are completely free of rats, cockroaches, or other pests. And then at the bottom, it says, Army ants show us that if everyone works together, we can do almost anything. And then there's this little text feature at the bottom of the page. We don't need to do them right now, but I'm just going to read it to you. It says, tell about it. Tell about a time when you were part of a group that all worked together to get a big job done. Think about it. How do army ants know to make ant bridges and ant balls? Do you think they know what they are doing, or is it an unthinking instinct? And then look it up. Where do army ants live? Okay, so just stop for a moment here and think to yourself. And if you could say what you're thinking out loud too, that always helps your brain process what you're doing. I'm going to switch over to my PowerPoint. Based on what I read, what are some things that you learned about army ants on this page? Okay, so I'm going to tell you what I learned, and you can kind of compare it to what you learned. I learned that ants work together. I kind of knew that already, but I learned it a little bit more in this page. And I learned that army ants in particular, when they're crossing a river, they'll make a little ant bridge or they'll make ant balls to get across the river. And I also learned that sometimes ants will work together to eat a tiger, which is crazy. I had no idea that ants could eat a tiger. I'm wondering what you learned. Again, I wish I could hear from you about what you learned. I bet you learned some things that are the same and some things that are a little bit different. Okay, so now I'm going to read the page again. And this time, I want you to think about what the author most wants readers to understand and remember. So when I read it this second time, follow along with me as I read. And again, I'm going to try to make the screen a little bit bigger here. Let's go like this. Ooh, that's bigger. Okay. So follow along with me as I read. And again, try to think about, what do you think the author most wants the reader to understand and remember? The lifespan of an army ant is about 3 years. Army ants are famous for their ability to work together to accomplish amazing things. They march along like soldiers, sometimes a million at a time. Nothing can stop them. When they come to a river, they make an ant bridge of themselves to get across. If the river is very wide, they form large ant balls and float to the other side. Army ants eat mostly insects, spiders, and small animals, although they have been known to eat horses, cows, and even tigers that are tied up or caged. People who live in areas with army ants have to leave their homes for a day or two when the ants come marching through. When they return, their houses are completely free of rats, cockroaches, or other pests. Army ants show us that if everyone works together, we can do almost anything. Okay, so I'm going to switch back over to my PowerPoint here. Move my head. It's so weird, you guys. And then I want to ask you a few questions. Oh my gosh, what just happened? Hold on, let me do a couple of adjustments here. Let me move this over. I don't know what's going on with this. Get out of there. Click on this. Thank you for being patient. From current slide. Okay, here we go. Okay, so we just read that page about army ants again, and I want to ask you a few questions about it. First of all, what do you think is the most important to understand and remember from that page? Think to yourself. And then think about it in another way. So this next question is, if you had to say what that passage, what that page was about in one sentence, what would you say? Think it to yourself. And then just say it out loud to a family member or a pet or an invisible person standing next to you. Okay. I'm wondering if you were like me and you were thinking, if you had to say what that passage was about in one sentence, what would it say? I'm wondering if you would have said something like, I think that passage was about how army ants do amazing things when they work together. Wonder if you said something kind of like that. And then the last thing I'd like you to do is say why you think that's the most important thing to remember from that page. Or why do you think that's the one sentence that says what that passage was about? So give some reasons why, and I'll switch back to the page from Army Ants for a minute. Why do you think that's the most important thing to remember from this page? Okay. So maybe you said something like, well, I think the most important thing to remember from that page is that army ants can do amazing things when they work together. And the reason I think this is because there are lots of examples of how army ants do things together. Like army ants can travel a million at a time. Army ants make a bridge together. If a bunch of army ants are together, they can eat a tiger that's caged. A whole bunch of army ants together make it so that people have to leave their houses when the army ants come through. There's so many examples on that page that show how army ants work together to do amazing things. I was also thinking maybe one reason you could think that that was the most important thing to remember it was because there was that sentence at the bottom of the page that was in bold letters and italic letters. So that was like a text feature that the author used to show us, remember this thing. This is an important thing to remember. Okay, so we just identified an important idea. We read a passage and we stopped and we thought about it for a while. And we just pulled one most important idea out of that passage. Like if we had to explain to somebody what we learned about army ants in just one sentence, we decided what that one sentence would be. When we do that, we are identifying important ideas. And believe it or not, it's a hugely important skill in reading. Because if you can pull out the most important ideas, that shows that you're really understanding what the author is trying to say when you read. And it also shows that you're not just reading the words, you're really stopping to think about the words and what the words mean. When you can identify important ideas, your brain is doing this extremely hard and important work of thinking about everything and making meaning of it. So good job. Congratulations. You're becoming so much smarter and you're doing such great work and your brain is growing and growing. So, as you do your reading on your own this week, whether it's a nonfiction book or a fiction book, I really encourage you to stop every once in a while and think about these two questions. What do you think is the most important to understand and remember on this page? And if you had to say what this passage or this page you just read is about in one sentence, what would you say? And then just stop and think for a minute. And also try to think about why you think that's the most important idea. Okay, we're going to practice this again together on Wednesday. And then on Thursday, I'm going to give you a page from Lifetimes and ask you to practice it on your own and send me your ideas of what you came up with. But we'll practice it together one more time first on Wednesday. Thank you so much. It was really fun to learn about army ants with you. And I will see you next time. Goodbye, third graders.